Welcome to Photoshop for Digital Photographers. Brought to you by the Digital Photography Connection. And now, here's your host, Michael Rather.
In this week's tutorial, we're going to be using a command found in Photoshop called Apply Image. And really, I could spend all day in Apply Image when I'm going through specific images just to put a creative spin on the image that I'm working with. And in this tutorial, kind of see what I mean. But we can take an already good shot, as you see here on the screen, and then put an artistic spin to it and be able to produce a completely different result. And by the way, this week's image is coming to us from iStock Photo, and this image is from photographer Phil Cardamone, and we'd like to thank iStock Photo for allowing us to use this image in today's podcast. And I'm going to go ahead and take this image, put it into full screen mode by hitting the F key on my keyboard. And let me just move the image here in the upper left hand corner. And I'll bring our layers palette right into view here. And let me go ahead and get rid of these layers that we used to create our effect. And we'll start again from scratch. Now, before we get to the Apply Image command, I want to first take a quick tour through the channels here once. And what I want to do is I'm going to click first on the red channel. And what I want to do is I want to click through the red, green, and blue channels just to kind of see how the contrast of the image is laying out. And you can see when I'm on this red channel here, we've got quite a bit of contrast between the straw and also the truck when we're in the red channel. When we go to the green channel, we don't see quite as much contrast that's going on. And then we click down here to the blue, we kind of see some of that opposite of the red channel there. So we're getting quite a bit of contrast both in the blue and the red channel. And we want to make note of that because as we use the Apply Image command, we're going to be wanting to pick from these channels here in order to get our effects. So I'm going to go ahead and click back on the RGB channel, and then I'll click right over here back to our layers panel. Now we're ready to begin using the Apply Image command. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click right down here in the bottom of the layers palette on the Create a New Layer icon, just to give myself a new blank layer. Then I'm going to come up to the Image menu and I'm going to drop down to Apply Image down here toward the bottom. And when I get there, what I want to do is, as you can see, I can pick from the various channels, the RGB channel or any of these individual color channels that we just looked at. And if you'll recall, when we were browsing through the channels, we noticed that red and blue seem to have the most contrast. So we're going to focus on those two channels as we use the Apply Image command. And I'm going to go ahead and select the red channel here for a moment. And my blending mode, I'm going to move this up to normal, and I'm going to make sure that the opacity is set to 100%. Now I'm showing you how to do this, at least the way we're going to be doing it in this tutorial, but you can go through and actually start manipulating some of the blending and opacity changes here, and you'll get totally different effects. This is kind of what I was referring to before about being able to spend hours and hours in the Apply Image command, because there are so many variations that can be had from using this command. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and that's going to then fill this layer with that red channel, that merged red channel. Next, what we want to do, though, is come up to our blending modes. And so what I'm going to do is we could come in and you can start playing around. You might want to say, well, let's go ahead and darken these areas. And all of a sudden you can see those areas that are affected by red are going to be coming through. The pumpkin, obviously, which has some red in it. The red tail light here down in the bottom right-hand corner. The red side of the barn. And then we've got some of the flowers. So we can see that we're already getting kind of a unique piece of the image just by going to darken. But what we want to do is we want to keep moving down. We could look at what lighten does, and obviously that gives us a completely opposite effect, bringing that blue truck out. And I'm going to drop all the way here to soft light. Now I could go through all these blend modes so you could see them, and that's again what I mean by you can just spend lots and lots of time trying out different blend modes. But as I toggle this layer on and off, you're starting to see that I'm getting a lot of good contrasty type of detail, especially in the pumpkin and also in some of the straw area. And as I toggle this on or off, you can see a lot of that detail being picked up here now in the image. Next, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to actually add a layer mask to this because I want to retain some of these areas but not all of the areas. And so I'm going to add a layer mask. Again, I'm going to come down to the bottom of the layers palette and I'm going to click right here on add layer mask, and that's going to give me a layer mask. Now the layer mask is in white. What I really want is the opposite or the inverse of that. So I'm going to hit the Command I key. That'll be the Control I on the PC. That's going to fill the mask with black. Then I'm going to want to make sure that my foreground color is white down here in the bottom. And you can get there if you can hit the D key on the keyboard, and that will reset things and give your foreground going to white. And I'm going to use a normal brush, and I'm going to go ahead and paint with an opacity. Right now I'm going to use an opacity of 100%, and all I did was hit 0 on the keyboard and that gave me 100. If I wanted to paint, say, with 50%, I could hit a 5 on the keyboard and that would take me to 50%. You can also grab the slider here and move your adjustments however you want, but I want the opacity to be set at 100%. And I am going to come in here and pull out some of these areas we just talked about. You can see the straw area and how much more contrast that we got by using the apply image. Also the flowers, I'm going to do a little bit of them. And then what I want to do is I want to lower this opacity. I'm going to change the opacity to 30. So I'm going to hit the 3 key on the keyboard. Then I'm going to paint through just a little bit of these corn stalks going on right here. And you can kind of see in the layer mask over here the areas where I've used the opacity of 100% versus the opacity of 30%. Next, we want to come in and let's do an apply image command again. And again, once again, I'm going to create a new layer on the very top. I'll click the new layer icon. I'm going to come back to the image menu and drop down to apply image. And this time, let's use that other channel that we saw a lot of contrast in. That was the blue channel. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the blue channel. Once again, my blending mode here is going to be normal with 100% opacity. And then I'm going to click and say OK. Now, once again, you can experiment with some of the various tones and colors. Obviously, that gives you a totally different effect by just isolating out the blue truck. That's really not what I'm going for here, but if it was, this would be a way to potentially isolate that item. We could come through and we could lighten the image, and obviously you're going to see that blue channel really start changing once again. We could go to soft light as we did before, and that's adding a lot of contrast. But this time I think I'm going to drop down here to luminosity. And as I drop down to luminosity, you can see that that's really starting to affect and make some further interesting changes. You can really start to see some of the straw down here being carried out even in more greater detail. Some of the flowers and the pumpkin are getting blown out, and that's to be expected, but we'll be able to come in and fix all of that just by adding a layer mask and doing just a little bit of painting. And once again, we want to invert this mask from white to black. So again, that's a Control I on the Mac or Control I on the PC. And this time I'm going to lower my brush. I'm going to paint with about 30%. And I'm going to come in and start bringing in some of this straw that we see here. Again, I can paint and paint over and over the area. I could have started out at 100%, but I decided I want to kind of do a cumulative type of an effect. Also, the pumpkin, I'm going to add a little bit of change to it. That's a bit too much. And so if you ever want to back out of what you're doing, I'm going to hit the X key on the keyboard to paint with black, and that's going to bring things right back in there for me. Then I'm going to come up here and darken through some of these stalks here just a little bit. And let's go ahead and see what happens with these flowers. And this starts to bring some of the detail out, but once again, It's a little bit too much. I'm going to lower the opacity of the brush to 10%. I hit the 1 key on the keyboard. I'll hit the X again on my keyboard to make sure I'm painting with white, and I'll just brush over that lightly. And now you can see we're starting to really get a lot more contrast in this image. This was the before, and now this is the after. And you can see we're starting to shape things up nicely here. Now, once you get the image somewhat the way that you like, I always like putting a finishing touch on the image and adding just a little bit more contrast to the overall image. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and bring in our actions panel because I want to show you one of the actions from the TDPC action set number 3. I'm going to come down and let's go ahead and pick a rich glow without a color adjustment. We really use the color adjustment when we've got skin tones involved, but obviously in the image we're looking here on the screen, there are no skin tones. And I'm just going to click here on the play button, and that's going to then give me that rich glow look. Now that's a little bit heavy for this image for me, so I'm just going to come to the rich glow layer here, and I'm going to slide the opacity slider back just a little bit, just to give it somewhat of that nice foggy, hazy look. And then I want to open some of the things up. I'm going to make sure I'm on the rich glow layer, and I'm going to click right here on add a layer mask, because what I want to do this time is I want to paint with black, and I'm going to paint at 50%. So again, I hit the 5 key on the keyboard, and I just want to bring some of this window in just a little bit. Also, if there are some areas like the pumpkin, maybe you want just a little bit more highlighted, go ahead and select those, and that takes some of that dreamlike effect away. But then you can see we went from this image, which again is a really great image, but now we've really stylized it and kind of made it our own by using the apply image adjustment. And we also did use one of the TDPC action sets. And if you'd like to view more free Photoshop video tutorials, just head on over to our website at www.tdpconnection.com and then just click right here on the Photoshop tab, where you'll see hours and hours of free Photoshop video tutorials. Also, you can subscribe directly in iTunes or in your favorite RSS reader to have these podcasts downloaded to your device automatically each and every week. So you also might want to check that out if you'd like to have these podcasts automatically downloaded to your computer. Well, that concludes our tutorial for today. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again next week.